Hello everyone. If the music and the title of the video didn't give it away, this is a speed lapse of me creating this year's holiday render. Now this is not a tutorial, there are some elements that I will explain and you can use them in your own work. These are editing and replacing textures on items, editing the geometry of assets sometimes known as kit bashing, and repurposing one asset to look like another. This video is sped up in places, but I have tried to minimise the movement of the camera where possible. However, fair warning, I can be somewhat erratic with the viewport whilst working. Before I get started, I want to thank everyone who supports me in whatever way that you do. And for you watching this video, I do have a request. If you enjoy this video, consider clicking the subscribe button and hitting the bell icon to be notified when I upload again. Or place a comment down below, it really does help me and the channel out. As with most of my original scenes, I start with working on a background. This creator room asset is very good at creating walls and windows that seamlessly slot together. I already have an image I have sketched roughly out on paper, and as such I know the camera angle I want. This allows me to only create the specific items that will be viewable in the scene. I spent some time adding a wood colour and texture effect to the window surrounds and the baseboard. You can adjust how dark or light the texture is by changing its colour. In this case, I wanted the window surround to be lighter on the inside and the surround to be darker than the floor. Grouping items together in a scene can make navigating that scene so much easier. I add some additional items, importing a table and a set of chairs. You can split these up into individual items if you unparent them from each other. This way you can remove the chairs you don't want and keep the ones you do. It also allows you to scale the table as required. I wanted a calendar on the wall, but I do not have an asset with a calendar in it that I can use, and looking through the DAZ store I was unable to locate one either, so I decided to make my own. Using a magazine asset to give the base look, we can edit the images on the pages to look like a calendar. To do this, I make a note of the file name of the image, click on Browse and copy the file location from the address bar. Then, moving into Photoshop, I open the file. This will allow me to edit the image. Scouring the internet for a simple December calendar, I import it in and move it into position, resizing as required. I also decided to add a custom image to the top of the calendar, in this case last year's holiday render. Once done, save the file and name it something appropriate. Then back in DAZ Studio, replace the image. There we have it, a calendar. I actually ended up swapping the location of the rendered image and the calendar part. the calendar in place, I add a few other details, a clock and a Christmas tree, and I'm ready to add the models I will be using. You are possibly already aware that this image is a collaboration between myself and ZoeyRavern. Zoe is the developer of a visual novel called One Day at a Time. At its core, One Day at a Time is a story about two recovering drug addicts. Sounds like a simple premise, but it's so much more than that. Their struggle with addiction and subsequent recovery is entirely in your hands as the player. Your actions and choices guide both the main character and Lydia, who is the second half of the addicted duo, through the events both turbulent and rewarding that life throws at them. I've decided to have Lydia join Louise in this image. I'll provide a link to Zoe's game in the section below this video. Unfortunately, the selection of Christmas themed outfits is very lacking, so we tend to see a lot of images with several variations of this one that both these girls are wearing. To keep things YouTube safe, I've dressed them off camera. When positioning characters, I try to find a pose that is close to the final position I want. In the case of Lydia, I looked for a seated pose with her arms up on the table. Moving her into location, I can then fine tune the limbs to a final position for the render. Remember that anything outside of the camera view doesn't matter. As such, don't waste time worrying about moving everything into the correct place. I do the same with Louise, moving back and forth between each model to dial in the correct location for the hand. In the final image, I actually changed the position of one of Lydia's hands as it didn't look natural hanging down against the chair. Something to bear in mind with hands, or with any limbs, is that in a relaxed state, the joints are not rigid. Fingers are bent. It's a natural and relaxed position, so keep this in mind when posing, but also keep in mind that one force acts upon another. Where we have Louise's hand pushed against Lydia's, then it makes sense for Lydia's hand to be flat against the table. The final image is not going to be as close, so the kiss doesn't need to be totally accurate. What looks right for the camera doesn't always look right close up. Another asset I could not find was mistletoe, so much like the calendar, I decided to attempt to make this myself. I started with looking through the tree and bush assets I had, loading several of them into the scene and selecting the one that looked close enough to what I wanted. This is actually a good point to talk about references. Most of the images I've produced like this will start with me looking online at a reference image. This entire scene is actually from an anime image, albeit I've drastically changed the theme, but the idea of the kiss was there. Creating the mistletoe, I looked at several reference images and decided on a look that I liked. Adding the red seeds or fruit, seeds I think, was as simple as creating a small sphere, colouring it red and then making several node instances of it. Placing these in small groups onto the plant should give the desired effect. Again, no one will be scrutinising this close up, so you only need to give the idea of mistletoe. But me and you, we know the truth. With the mistletoe created, I move this into position above the girls. Now the fun part, dForce. I've covered this in other videos, but I want to simulate the dress so that it covers Lydia's legs and interacts with the chair correctly. To do this, I'm going to use the animation timeline. With Lydia selected, I create a keyframe at the end of the animation for both Lydia and the chair object. Then going back to the start of the timeline, I move the chair down and out. When you simulate the cloth over the timeline, it will be moved correctly by the chair as it pulls in to Lydia's legs. This can work for long dresses or anything. So long as it works with dForce, you can animate and have it drape over any surface. I do the same simulation with Louise. It takes a little longer to simulate with Louise. This is down to the sub D used, but also the texture memory will have an effect. This is why we hide any items in the scene not directly related to the simulation. The hair and background, for example. Sometimes it helps to hide other articles of clothing, like underwear or necklaces. Not only does this help speed up the simulation, but it will also reduce the chance of dForce explosions. However, even with all of this, sometimes dForce just shits the bed. Though if that does happen, you could try cancelling the simulation early. I've had some success with this. I add a few extra details to the scene, some presents on the table and some streamers to give it that Christmas holiday feel. I spend some time working on the background for outside the window, remembering to adjust the scale of items to account for perspective. I added a snow system, however in post-work denoising, the flakes were lost. I did go back and manually add them via Photoshop later. It's just something to bear in mind. When I'm happy with the lighting, I click render. A little bit of post-work later, and we have our image. I do hope you found this video entertaining. Have a relaxing holiday, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye bye.